and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam and I'm joined by my two co-hosts. We've got Josh Bacon and Joe Roberts. How are you two doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Enjoyed the race. How about you?
Yeah, no, enjoyed the race. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing good, thank you. It's a very exciting race.
Yeah, it was a great way to kick off the season. After a long race, a long wait. Sorry, we are back, and the season kicked off with a bang. It's fair to say. I mean, before the race, we had drama. Never mind during it. But yeah, starting with where all the drama started on the formation lap. Sergio Perez, his car stopped on track. I mean, at that point, I was distraught. As a Perez fan, I was like, this is over. Tears. It's curtains for Red Bull. And yeah, what was going through your both of your heads when you just see Perez just pull over on the formation lap?
I was quite shocked, to be honest, especially when they said on the commentary that the Red Bull pit lane kind of expected it because they weren't panicking or making any movements about it. And I was quite worried because the stewards were coming towards the car, and I think if a steward touches the car or tries to help restart a car, then you can't actually go back on track. So I'm thankful for Perez to brush him away and get going again. But yeah, it's a worrying time for Red Bull and Perez fans.
I just thought it was quite funny. Honestly, that second Red Bull car has just got a lot of gremlins in it, and yeah, even though I think Perez, I think it was kind of a blessing that he started from the pit lane, just due to the fact there's always going to be mayhem into turn one. There's always, especially when Mazepin spun, basically got himself back into the game, and obviously last season with his overtaking skills, he was always going to make it through the field.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the Mazepin spin there. I mean, we'll move on to the start of the race. I thought, to be fair, it was a clean start. No one really, there wasn't much contact, if any, to be honest. But then you're chilling, you're going through turn 3, and then you just see a Haas go flying off the track. I mean, at this point, you're seeing a Haas go flying into a wall at that corner. You're like, not again. Well, don't tell me this happened. But of course, it was Nikita Mazepin, and I was just there watching, like, oh no, has someone hit him? What's happened? And then they go to the onboard, and you just see him just like, nope, hit the curve too hard, got spinning off on his own. I mean, this sounds really harsh because it's been one race, but judging off practice, judging off qualify, judging off the first 3 corners, is he one of the worst drivers in Formula 1 history?
That's quite funny.
I don't think he would. I don't think he would be. I think there's been, as I remember when like the Virgin Racing and HRT, and even when the Caterhams came in the sport, there was some poor drivers, even like I think it was Roberto Merri, but I don't know. As in Schumacher had a spin. It's just that Haas car just looks undrivable in the way of confidence. I feel that Mick Schumacher kind of knew, he kind of expected just get through the first couple of laps and just get through the race just to build his confidence up for the rest of the season. But Mazepin, I remember Marta Brundle saying that you just need to keep it on the road. They know they're the slowest cars on the grid, and just build up their confidence for the rest of the season. Because Haas will be at the back of the grid for the moment. They've done what I think Williams were like 4 years ago. They're like 2 seconds or a second off Williams and the Alfa Romeo. So I don't think it was particularly wise for Mazepin to suddenly throttle it and then suddenly lose the back end.
It was such a rookie error. It was like from him. It was so poor. Like, why are you pushing? You're literally last. Like, why are you pushing so hard? I mean, Andrea De Cesaris has I've definitely butchered that name, it's the most F1 retirements with 148 and 208. If Mazepin can keep in the sport, I mean, he could be right after that record, because erratic, clumsy driving style is, oh my! Honestly, I saw it was comedic. We were watching the race downstairs, and we were honestly laughing when he went off. I mean, he's going to be called Nikita Mazepin now. I mean, it was so poor. I mean, and not Michael. Oh, this is going to be a common mistake. Mick Schumacher went off as well. Have it with problems, because, as you said, it's going to spend time at the back of the grid for a long time. So it might cut out there.
Yeah, I think the problem that Mazepin will have if he doesn't perform, even though he has the backing there. If I don't know if you guys watched the F2 race, there are some quick drivers, and there's like 7 or 8 that I feel that could easily get an F1 seat. Like if Lundgaard wants to move away from the Renault program, you've got even Robert, I think it's Robert Schwartzman as well. So you've got a number of drivers, which I think for the name Mick Schumacher, I think will stay in the sport because of the name, and I think the German sponsor they had. But if Mazepin doesn't perform, is it just it's probably just could be the money that keeps him in the sport rather than the actual talent that he has.
Yeah, his dad. It will basically keep him in the sport. But yeah, moving on from the hash, because we can't just abuse him for the whole podcast as much as, to be fair, I'd probably like to. The next real incident was Pierre Gasly. Lost his front wing after touching with Ricciardo's back right tyre, causing a VSC. We already had a safety car because of the Mazepin incident, which nothing really happened off the back of that. But yeah, Gasly losing win. And it's a shame because AlphaTauri of the weekend, they look very fast. They look like they could be really in the midfield battle. And this weekend, they outperformed Aston Martin, new team, Alpine, new team. They were, Gasly was matching like McLaren, Ferrari, like paces until he unfortunately lost his wing. But it was a shame for Gasly because he had the potential to get a really good finish.
Yeah, the AlphaTauri car looked quick all weekend, to be fair. And then when he qualified P5, I was pleasantly surprised. But he definitely deserved it. He's definitely fast enough. And it's just a shame because I think if that didn't happen, I reckon he would have competed with the likes of Norris, Ricciardo, and Leclerc and all that for P5 or any of those sort of positions. So it was a bit of a shame to see it. I didn't really see how it happened. I just saw him clip the back of Ricciardo's wheel, but I think there must have been more damage beforehand because it wouldn't have just fallen off from that slight touch. But yeah, if it didn't happen, then I think he definitely would have been up there in the fight for P5 with the rest of them.
Yeah. Now, his teammate, to be fair, Yuki Sonoda, what a debut. He has to be up there for one of the drivers of the day. He was really fantastic. He was aggressive into turn 1. He showed some real pace. He didn't look like a rookie. He looked like he'd been driving there for years. And I think that he is a great prospect in the sport. I know it's just judging of one race and a lot can change, but I thought he performed really well. He handled himself well, really humble guy. And I thought he was really phenomenal over the weekend, to be honest. I think it was almost a dream debut, finishing P9.
Yeah, I said in our preview podcast that Sonoda would have a strong debut race. So it's clearly I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, but I think he said in an interview afterwards that he was only 50% happy, which just shows what kind of character he's like as well. So even though it was his first ever race in F1, he got points and finished P9. He still wasn't happy with his own performance, which I think is good for the team in general, which just shows how high and how hard they should be working to get better positions.
Mm.
Yeah, I think Yuki Sonoda, I think it's going to be interesting how he develops over the season, because even though Perez did have a very good recovery, again, that second seat is so volatile that we could have like Albon coming into play next season. You could have Yuki Sonoda moved up. You could have Gasly potentially moving up or leaving the team. That the Red Bull like kind of sister team and actual main drivers, it is one of those like two teams that's very interesting to watch and analyze, because there's so much talent in that Red Bull driver pool, even in like an F2, that there's so much pressure. And if Yuki Tsunoda can actually live up to that pressure, I think he would do very well in the sport and be in it for a long period of time.
Yeah, certainly. You talked about how Sonoda was unhappy. One man who was definitely very unhappy was Valtteri Bottas. He was chugging along nicely. His pace, especially on during the race, was really solid. And then lap 31, it goes in for, you think, a routine pit stop, but no. He ends up having a 10.9 second pit stop with his front right not going on properly. It's a really tough one, and he wasn't happy with it because that pit stop kind of ruined his race. He could have been, or do you guys think that he could have been potentially putting more pressure on Verstappen and Hamilton if that pit stop had been more like a 2-3 second pit stop?
I think I don't think the pit stop helped. He showed some pace on his second set of mediums, I think it was, after he pit the first time. He was showing some pace to try and put some pressure on Verstappen. But I think Mercedes just went wrong with his strategy. Of course, he said in his post-race interview with Jensen, I think, that they weren't attacking with Lewis's strategy, but very defensive with Bottas's. And I think he didn't sound happy in that interview whatsoever. But I reckon if they were more attacking with him as well as Lewis, I reckon he could have been closer. But I don't think he had the pace to stay up with those two for the whole race.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think, Joe?
Sorry. I think Bottas. I think he would have closed the gap up and forced, I think, Max Verstappen to do to pit. I think it was a 6-second gap when Hamilton pitted, and I think when is it when Hamilton pitted or Max Verstappen? Yeah,
when Max pitted.
Yeah, Max pitted. So he would have, I think, been a bit of a barrier for Verstappen, which could then enable Lewis Hamilton to win the race a lot more comfortably than he did. But I think the thing with Bottas is just, it's the question of, I think when I remember Rosberg saying it in at a Sky preview show, saying that he needs to get into Lewis's head. But is it just because the environment at Mercedes is so around Lewis Hamilton that he can't, because the plans, the strategies that are made always going to work in favour of Lewis?
Sure, yeah. Moving on to the Alpine team, lap 34. Fernando Alonso had to retire with brake problems, which was a real shame, as it was quite nice to see Alonso and Vettel. They had a few battles in the Alpine and the Aston Martin. It was like looking back in like 2010, 11, like back then, seeing these two great drivers with so many titles battling each other. But yeah, it wasn't a brilliant debut for Alpine, was it?
No, like you said, Martin Brundle said the battle between Alonso and Vettel was a 6-time world champion battle, which is something you don't see every day. But it wasn't the best of debuts back for Alpine. He didn't look too comfortable with the car, to be honest. Even before his DNF, he was falling down the grid. But at the beginning, he looked all right. He had some pace and was battling a bit. But yeah, he just didn't work very well for Alpine at all this weekend, even with, I think, Ocon coming 13th.
Yeah.
Not even making the points again. So they've got a lot of work to do to catch up. but they've definitely got the talent to do so.
Yeah, Alonso, I think, is one of my favourite drivers on the grid. Just getting the maxing out of the car, he always does. I think there's the rear brake. I think it's about to get a rear brake failure. So I think that's why he couldn't really push the car that much in the second stint. But that Alpine, even though it does look quite slow, if you look at like where Ocon is, I think he will get the maximum out of that car. And I wouldn't be surprised if Alpine get in front of Aston Martin midway through the season, obviously because of development, but also just due to the fact Alonso knows how to get the maximum out of a car. So yeah, I think in the next races we'll see where Alpine actually are and are in the standings. But yeah, it wasn't the day for Alpine.
No, it certainly wasn't. And it wasn't a great day either for Aston Martin. I mean, one of the things that didn't help Ocon, who ended up in 13th, was Sebastian Vettel taking him out in turn one. Ocon was coming down the straight, looked at a nice overtake, and then Vettel locked up going into the corner and took both the drivers out. Vettel getting wing and then getting a 10-second penalty. Vettel, I think, finished, I think it was 15th in the end, which was poor, with Stroll coming 10th. So 1 point on the board for Aston Martin. I've forgotten the team principal's name, but he wasn't happy, or he said that over the break with the changes that had come in, the rule changes, they really didn't suit their car, with the high rake and low rake, the really helping one of them, the other one not really being great. But it was getting a point. Was it that bad, or how do you judge Aston Martin's return to Formula One?
Firstly, I think it's Otmar Safnir is the name of the team principal. I think a point. I think they'll be disappointed, but I think it was the best that they could do from the weekend. Was other teams and other cars looked faster than them all weekend, and especially during the race. So 1 point I think is satisfactory. But if you go back to the bit between Vettel and Ocon, I think it was just stupid from Vettel. Like, Ocon was past him and he tried to brake late or something and just locked up and then just went to the back of him, and then trying to blame Ocon through the comms, saying why has he cut back across the racing line when he's literally just turning to go right into the corner, which is what you should be doing. But yeah, it was just a disappointing weekend for Aston Martin. I think they'll sort the problems out because they haven't had the cleanest of weekends or testing either. So they'll sort stuff out through these next 3 weeks, but I'm not sure if they'll be battling with the likes of McLaren and Ferrari yet.
Yeah, I think Aston Martin is probably the most disappointing of teams, considering their performance last season. I know like the regulations change, but you kind of have to adapt it. Like even though, for example, Mercedes have problems, they've just got on with the job in hand and not complained. I think with Aston Martin, the problem they have is the fact that the teams, as in even like Ferrari, even though I absolutely slated them in the preview, I think they're in front, clear in front of Aston Martin, and it's going to take quite a long time, I think, to catch back up. So you could end up being a very tough year for Aston Martin. But the rate, again, with Josh, with the Vettel thing, it did look very stupid. It did look a bit like the Max Verstappen Vettel in Britain. In like 2017 or 2017, I think, or 18. So yeah, it's just it was just a very, very disappointing weekend for Aston Martin.
You mentioned there about Ferrari, and in the lead up to the season and in the lead up to the race, Joe, you were very critical of the new Ferrari power unit. Ferrari ended up finishing Leclerc 6th, Sainz 8th, and then the Alfa Romeo, who used the power unit, came 11th and 12th, and then the Haas. Yeah, well, their car's rubbish. But are you starting to take back your negative opinion of the Ferrari power unit after a very solid performance from both Alfa Romeo and from Ferrari?
I wouldn't say I'll take it back, just due to the fact I think the other cars have, as in the Mercedes engine still, I think I think it's just level on par with the Honda engine at the moment. Ferrari is still considerably down on power, the same as the Renault or don't know what they call it, the Alpine engine. But I think it's just the other teams not performing well enough. I think if for example Aston Martin got their concept right, I think they would be faster than the Ferraris. But I think it's you probably have to judge it when we get to I think it's Portugal. I think that's round 4. I think when you get into round 4, I think you get a better understanding of where people are and who's going to be battling for the championship and the constructors.
Sure, yeah, that's fair enough. And moving on to the drama towards the end of the race, lap 53, and just all around towards the end of the race, Verstappen versus Hamilton. What a battle that was! It was looking for all the world that Verstappen was going to overtake Lewis quite comfortably. Lewis looked dead and buried, but no, Verstappen did get the overtake, but it was deemed illegal and he had to give the place back. What are your guys' opinions on the illegal overtake? Because I've seen a lot of Max Verstappen fans who aren't very happy, saying that Lewis used that part of the track all race and nothing happened, but then Max used it to get an overtake and he gets penalised.
I think the funny thing is that I wouldn't blame it on I wouldn't blame it on the drivers. It's clearly off the track. Originally, if you look at the regulations, they say if you pass anybody out of the track limits, that you have to give the place back. With Lewis Hamilton doing what he did in turn 4, the reason he did that, which was on TED Notebook, is because at the beginning of of each weekend they have a driver briefing, and it's turned out like all track limits. At the beginning of the briefing, they said there was no track limits. Then after practice 1, there were track limits, and then that's why when Lewis Hamilton went on the radio, he said, "Well, I wasn't told this." So it's kind of a bit naive to say that it's that reason that Max Verstappen lost the race, when it's just due to the fact Lewis Hamilton did it what he thought the rules were. As you saw a couple of times Max Verstappen do it, so he could have easily got penalised. But I think the FIA need to get hot on it quicker so the drivers know what not to do during the race, and then you'll be able to minimize the risk of people complaining, especially Max Verstappen fans.
Yeah, I completely agree with Joe. The FIA needs to crack down on, or make it more clear about the track limits before the race weekend started. Because obviously Red Bull, they said you can't do it during the race, and Mercedes like, yes, you can. And eventually, when FIA did get involved and say you can't do it anymore, they all stopped. And the only reason I think that the Max had to get the position back was because he gained an advantage from going off the track, because he could keep the speed going. So if if no one gained an advantage from it, I don't think he would have had to give the position back, but he obviously did. But then talking about giving the position back, I think he gave it back in a ridiculous place because it was on coming out of turn 9 or 10, I think, onto a straight with DRS, and then he just slowed down, losing momentum going into turn 13, I think. I reckon turn 11. I think he should have waited, go through turn 11 and turn 12 and do it at the end of turn 13, because then he could let Lewis go past on the straight and go in behind him and get the slipstream, which then gives him a better advantage going into the home straight. But that's just my opinion. With the track limits, they just need to crack down on it and make it a bit more clear for the drivers.
Yeah, I think the problem with that though is they talked to the FIA afterwards, and they said the Verstappen couldn't have done that because when getting told that they need to give a place back, they need to give it back at the soonest possible bit. They can't really tactically do it to gain an advantage. But yeah, other than that, towards the end of the race, Gasly and Latifi both retired. No one, it wasn't shown any coverage. If you weren't monitoring the left hand side of the screen with the leaderboard, you wouldn't have really noticed it. So I don't think much has come out about why they retired, but they were both in positions where they were never going to get points anyway. Gasly had a miserable race, and Latifi quite uneventful. But new look Williams. What did you think about their performance? It was improved, but was it was it significantly better?
I think it was improved, but just same old, if that makes sense. I think other teams have improved as well, so it just makes them look like they haven't improved. But they've definitely improved with pace, but it's just positioning. They can't change it because everyone else has, except for Haas, everyone else has improved pace-wise, so it just looks the same as last season, really.
Yeah.
I personally like the Williams livery. I like the tribute with Murray Walker as well. I think the problem is with this all is like liveries. There's the concept of like the photos and are always going to look like pretty awful anyway. But I think overall Williams had a decent race with George Russell. But yeah, it's just I don't know. Just trying to get the maximum performance out of that car is going to be interesting to see where they develop, or they just focus on next season, where I think they'll probably be able to push themselves up the grid.
Sure. The only team we haven't really mentioned here is the Merchant Josh, and I'm pretty sure Joe you're repping them as well. It's the McLaren team. I'd say a really impressive day today. Lando coming fourth, which Josh, I think you had a sneaky suspicion he was going to do well this weekend, and Daniel Ricciardo coming seventh. Not quite getting to grips with his new car, but a decent finish anyway. How do you think they did? I think it was a really good start to the season for them.
Yeah, I think it was a very impressive weekend for them. They looked quite strong throughout the weekend in all the practice sessions and qualifying. I think they would have been a little bit disappointed with qualifying because they got beat by Gasly, but obviously him getting the wing damage and then over them having racing well in the race, it just went well for them. I think Lando looked strong in that car because he's known it for 2 years. He was wall to wall with loads of people and then kept pulling away from Leclerc when he was ahead of him. But like you said, Ricciardo just needs to get used to the car, and then I think he'll be higher and fighting more with other people when he's had more experience in the car.
Yeah, I think it's you get to a point where I think when Lewis Hamilton retires and you got, I think, like Kimi and Vettel, you got you can kind of see where the crop of talent and the kind of passing of the mantle, and that will be, I think, Lando Norris, Leclerc, Russell, and also Max Verstappen as well. So I think Lando Norris had a very, very strong race. As Josh said, he knows the car. I think Ricciardo just needs to get used to it. He just needs to feel comfortable in how the car drives. Just because I think it's a new dashboard or a new system of how to get a better. I think how you start. I can't remember what it's called, but because obviously moving from Renault, or is now called Alpine, to McLaren. So I think he's just getting used to the engineers, used to everything else, and he'll be on his way fighting Lando Norris. I think again, it's very hard to judge whether they can like match Perez at the moment, but I think they'll be fighting for fourth for races when Ricardo manages to get hold of that car.
Yeah. Well, after an amazing race, Hamilton winning by 7.5 tenths. Bottas getting fastest lap. Mercedes got 1 and 3 on the podium, which is, I think, an ideal start for them. To kind of wrap up, who are your choices for driver of the day? I think there could be a unanimous decision here, unless someone whips out a surprise choice.
Yeah, I think unless there's a surprise one of someone who just drove consistently well the whole race, but I think it's obvious that having started in the pit lane and then ending up finishing, I think P5 with Perez. Yeah, Perez was definitely my driver of the day. He made his way through the field. Yeah, you do that. He made his way through the field extremely well, like he always does in Bahrain. And even though he pitted 3 times, he still managed to finish P5. So yeah, it was a very impressive race from Perez.
I'm going for the man who won it, Lewis Hamilton. I think he's shown, I think personally, why he's the 7-time world champion. I think he's also shown why he's one of the best that I think we've seen in F1. I think Max Verstappen's got a lot to learn. I think Max Verstappen reminds me of 10 years ago. He reminds me of Lewis Hamilton then at McLaren, but he couldn't like manage his tires into the correct way. I think Lewis Hamilton is, from what I've watched F1 since he started, he's changed his style of driving tremendously. I don't think if he was even at the start of his Mercedes days, he would be able to carry those tires all the way to the end and also defend from Max Verstappen. So yeah, for me, he is Lewis Hamilton, just due to the fact he showed himself why he is the best in the sport and why he could potentially outmuscle Max Verstappen if it's an even fight, just due to the fact of his great managing of tyre wear.
Yeah, I'm going to go for my boy Checo as well, but I'd like to give honourable mentions to Lewis, who was fantastic, really superb. Sonoda as well had a fantastic debut race. Kimi Raikkonen, I thought, went about his business well in the Alfa Romeo, and Nikita Mazepin for a fantastic first 2 corners before he unfortunately lost it on the third. But yeah, Checo Perez, my driver of the day, for being phenomenal, having those issues on the formation lap, starting in the pits, not ideal for anyone, but Bahrain, he glides through the field. He was phenomenal, did so well. And if he hadn't started in the pits, I think he could have got 4th and might have been pushing 3rd, but I'm not sure. But yeah, that wraps up the podcast. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Josh and Joe, for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having.
Yeah, thanks for having.
And yeah, we'll have to wait 3 weeks until the next race in Imola, but we'll keep bringing you content. Don't you worry. It's going to be a long wait, but we'll keep supplying you with the top tier content. But yeah, thank you for watching. Comment your driver of the day. Give us your thoughts on the race, what you thought, and thank you for listening. If you're listening on any audio platforms, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Oh, and also put the numbers for the F1 league as well, fancy F1 as well.
Yeah, we've got F1 league. I will link that. Thank you, Joe. But yeah, thank you for watching.